This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and today's guest is Kim Skanson, a transformational business leader with executive experience at major brands like Target and Cargill. She's also the author of the new book, Attitude Advantage: The Timeless Power of Positive Perspective, where she shows how mindset shapes success. Kim has spent her career leading transformation at Fortune 50 companies and mentoring emerging leaders, guided by a leaf. Rooted in her grandmother's story of resilience, that perspective turns challenges into opportunities. Kim, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It is great to be here for me and for you. Thank you so
Yes,
much. I really
right?
appreciate it. And it's funny. So I know in the book you write about your grandma a lot, and I know for me, my grandma was basically mom 2.0. Like my mom, it was the early 80s, so she was like, I got to go get a job to help support the family. So my grandmother had a lot of those like caregiving responsibilities, walking me to school, making my lunches and stuff like that. So I know the importance of having that support system in a family, and it obviously is important for you to bring it up because it's a big focus, early on in your book. So can you tell us a little bit about Inga?
Yeah. A remarkable lady. If you ask me, who's one person that you no longer can see and you'd love 1 minute of time with or a lunch with, I would always pick her. Um, because she lived a life of positivity and she emulated that in all she did. So whether she, um, came from really worn, torn times in how she grew up in East Germany to having to start anew, she just really emulated positivity to me. So as a young child, she was somebody I looked to. I lived on her farm for part of my early childhood years. She was somebody who was a big part of raising me. And so I just, as I got to know her, and even later in life, as I got to her life, as I got to know her better, I thought, what an inspiration she was for so many people, not only myself. And so when I was thinking about this story I had to tell, she was the first thing that came to mind. So she's the heart and center of I think, the matriarch kind of role that I've taken with my own family. And she's that's why she had to be with me on the journey.
That's awesome. And it wasn't easy for you because you describe in the book that you had some fill in your expletive jobs early on. What do you think, like, having that sort of like positive sort of upbringing help you through those trying times? Because sometimes people go through trying times and had kind of a crappy, home base or
Yeah.
family, but luckily you were able to have some of that positivity to help you grow. What did that mean in terms of that early journey for you?
Yeah, I think I look back a lot. I think as you age and you look back and you're wiser, as I always like to say, we get this wisdom with all the years that go by. You start to look back and you look at these pivotal points in your life, whether it's career journeys or personal, struggles or whatever. And I think back in those early days, like just again seeing somebody with a beam of light and always smiling, even when I knew, my grandma might have been in pain, but like just this kind of constant, like, hey, like glass half full mentality. And so I don't know if you can see it, but in my little office here, I have a little pillow with the acronym PMA on it. So positive mental attitude is something for me that I've started to really try to emulate for a lot of years. And I think it was again from my early days of childhood or whatever the thing was back then. And there's parts of that are captured in my book and stories that are told of growing up as a woman leader in technology. There's not a lot of people that are like me or that look like me around the table. And so you start to translate, every chapter of life. There's always kind of been that thing that's, could have held me back, but I turned it into this like opportunity to strive forward and to like motivate me to do something bigger than myself.
I love that. That's great. And I want to break down that acronym a little bit, the positive mental attitude you write about in the book. And it's a big sort of like the thesis of your life. But there has always been this sort of, I guess, over the last few years about, and I think most people looking at from the outside would be like, oh, so you're saying like turn that frown upside down, like put a smile on your face or no matter what. And I think people look at that without, going into nuance of it. Like, no, you can't just turn, making, smiling won't just make you happy, or just you're trying to be happy won't make you happy. So what do you say to people like those devil's advocates of like, there's no such thing as like turning on a positive mental attitude because, for whatever upbringing you had or whatever life you're living, it just to be able to turn that switch is impossible. What do you say to folks like that?
Yeah. Maybe the switch doesn't need to turn overnight or on a dime, but it turns over time, right? So like be in tune enough to like be sad, be mad, show that feeling, that anger, whatever that is in that struggle that might be in front of you. So again, whether it's personally, professionally, different health reasons, like there's always a reason to be sad, upset, mad, and be like, I can't be positive today, Kim. I can't do it. I'm sorry. Love your acronym. Like great philosophy, but really not happening for me. The reality is like, it's okay. Like just be in tune with your emotion. And I think a lot of what I have learned in my time is like talking that through, whether it's to myself or having my board of director or stakeholder groups, close friends I can talk to that, hey, I'm really having a bad day. Or being transparent in work as a leader of people. If I can tell my team, like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, yeah, like just 2 days ago, I went and visited my aunt who's in hospice care, and that was an emotional moment for me. She was a big part of my life too. And I told them that. I said, hey, I'm probably not my best in this meeting right now because here's where I'm headed after. Like all of a sudden the connection point I can make with people and they can be like, oh, okay, Kim, you'll get to your positivity later, but right now be sad. It's okay. So I would just say it's don't think of it as it's the light switch to turn on and off. It's like it's a mindset, right? And when the mindset is about like being in tune with how you're feeling, being okay with and sharing how you're feeling, and then ultimately looking at the good of that, ultimately seeing the positivity around you, the glass half full mentality, golly, gets you through things faster if you can get there.
And that mindset fueled you throughout your career because you write about being underestimated can be a competitive advantage for you. You know, I think we're both old enough to know that women in business was not an easy thing, regardless of what industry you were in. It was, we lived very much in a man's world and the patriarchy was very much real. I think a lot of that has changed over time, but tell me about sort of how that mindset was able to carry you through when you were being underestimated early in your professional career.
Well, I think for me, like I grew up playing sports from a young age. And so I was always a part of a team. And so I probably have a little genetic DNA that's a little predisposed around being competitive or like wanting to win at the sports I played. So I kind of always thought of it a little bit that way. And I bring that mindset to my work. I want to do a good job. I want to help the company win. I want to help the team win. And at times when I had the kind of those roadblocks that might get in the way, or I was, I have so many, and some of those stories are captured in the book of times I was mistaken for somebody I wasn't, or assumed to be somebody I wasn't because maybe of my gender or where I wouldn't have ever gotten that role, based on, different factors or preconceived ideas people might have had. And so I think you have to that competitive, it almost fired something in me greater. And so I tell a story in the book a little bit about working on a manufacturing line when I was 20 years old and having, senior management, we're all men in suits coming up behind me and never looking anyone on the assembly line in the eyes, thanking them for the work they did. And I, at that point at 20 years old, said, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to college at the time. I knew I was going to do something and I was going to be something greater than I was at the time. But I knew that when I worked, I was always going to thank the people that worked with me, for me, whatever that was. And that was at 20. And so I think back to these pivotal moments in life when you felt underestimated or unappreciated, like it grew like a little fire. And I think that comes from my like competitive want to win roots of being an athlete and still competing a little bit when I can. I'm at my age now, but I think for everybody, I would just say find that fire, find that thing that you want to win at, and don't let other people bring you down, right? Don't let other people say you can't do it, right? Because that if they do, like again, that's my reason to prove them even farther that they're wrong.
Yeah, and you did it, and you went on to have a remarkable career working at places like Travelers, Target, Cargill. Um, when you're working with companies that are at such a high level, like pardon the phrase, like the major leagues of their industry, is there difference there that you see when you're working with other companies where you're like, oh boy, you definitely feel a difference when you're walking through the doors of a Target or a Cargill or something, as opposed to fill in the blank, company. What is it about the air there, the oxygen, the culture that differentiates those companies that you work with and had leadership position with, as opposed to other companies?
I think I've been fortunate in my career to work for companies that are very people first. Focused, and so the culture is very collaborative, and so I have learned so much for the people around me. So I think when I walk through the doors at you named company I've been at, there are just some remarkable people, like talent, intelligence, like thought leadership. I've learned a ton from. I look back at my Target days. I was there about 10 years, and I just actually had dinner with one of my former coworkers and dear friend last week, and we were just reminiscing and thinking back about what was unique about Target then and probably still now, right? Because I have friends still there. Just they hire great people and they develop people. And I feel like I got an MBA in leadership just by working there for 10 years, because of the discipline they have around developing people and coaching and striving for you to be the best you can be. So I feel very fortunate in the companies I've worked for, really to be in tune with people. I worked at Cargill. the global footprint of that organization is massive, right? So you have to learn and appreciate when your direct reports, most of them English might be their second or third language, right? So I think through the experience that I've had, maybe that's a little bit the difference, right? When you get to a scale or some of the scope at that massive level, there's just a little bit of a difference. And I find the people in the peer group and just overall at every level in the organization, just top notch talent that I feel very fortunate to have been a part of.
You mentioned Target, your time there, and we're recording this after Target just announced their new CEO was coming into Michael Fedelke.
Fidelki,
Fedelke.
yes, he was my business partner back in the day. He was my business partner back when I was in technology at Target. He supported the technology arena, so I knew him quite a while ago, and I'm just really excited for him and all he's done in his career.
And the crazy thing, I think, what a lot of what's kind of, and I know it's been a rough couple of years for Target, but the inspiring part of the story is that Michael started as an intern there at Target, and if you look at his LinkedIn profile, it's like the funniest thing you'll ever see because it's like started as an intern in like 20 years ago, and like every little position, I'm sure the one he had working
Yeah,
side by side
yeah.
with you. What what do you think? Knowing him, knowing what the company's been through, and the fact that he has sort of lived and breathed the company's entire life. What do you see the future now for Target? Just as an outsider in terms of
Yeah.
how you feel like he's going to fit in now as the supreme leader of Target.
Yeah, well, I think it helps when you've grown up there, right? Because you have all the history, you know the culture inside and out, and you have a perspective that a lot of people don't when they're coming in from the outside. So I think he's gonna bring a lot of, um, well-earned, credibility from all that history. That's gonna mean his voice is gonna really matter and I think be listened to in a way that is really gonna help the company move forward. He was a phenomenal partner back in that day, and I wish him nothing but the best, but I think they couldn't have picked a better candidate, and I think that experience is gonna really play off well.
Awesome, awesome. That's good. Thank you for sharing that with me. All right, so let's get back into like sort of like the positivity and leadership. And Target, obviously, they need a lot of positivity right now, and hopefully Michael will find a way to help things along there with the company. But what are some mistakes people make with positivity? Like, for example, let's just like say hypothetically, Michael comes in with like a super, rainbows and sunshine positivity. That again, I'm hypothesizing he may not do this, but I'm just saying some leaders may come in when they come into to a new organization, be like, everything's gonna be great, positivity. Can sometimes rub people the wrong way, especially if they've been through the struggles and through the wars. How do you toe that line, especially like if you're someone like yourself who's like comes in with that positive attitude? Not everyone's gonna have that from the jump. So tell me about threading that needle.
Yeah, like example, just last week I was talking to my team about a kind of a heavy topic and one that I knew people had different opinions on. And so, just really try to be transparent. Like, hey, I know there might be varying opinions of where we're at. And I know that some of you might be struggling, but hey, here's how we can take this opportunity and turn it into. So I kind of lead with the trying to level the field. Like I understand that people might be at different places. So as a leader of people, I think that's important just because I might see it differently or be positive because I'm going to choose positivity. Because I always think, your mindset is a conscious thing you're gonna decide every day, and it's probably one of the first things you do when you get up in the morning or wake up is, "Hey, how am I gonna show up today?" And for me, it's always that positivity is gonna come first. But the reality is, yeah, and people might be having a bad day. They might not feel well. They might this or that, don't like a decision that was made. And I think if I can at least acknowledge and try to pull us to a level playing field, and then from there try to pivot to how do we see this as an opportunity using open-ended questions that draw out those around you that might be struggling a little bit to have airspace, time to voice their concerns, their struggles, at least be heard. I think that helps, really bring a more of a cohesive team together.
And when it comes to this leadership perspective and the PMA mindset, generations. I think I don't want to out you, but I believe you're like me, a Generation Xer. So how does this PMA mindset play within other generations, whether it's
Yeah.
Boomers, whether it's Gen Z, Gen Y? Tell me about that because we all know that all generations are very different. They all have very different attitudes. I think as us as Gen Xers, obviously we were the slackers at first, but now we're always kind of like had that little rebellious side. I think that's probably why technology blew up, in the early 2000s because of Gen Xers. But tell me about like in terms of dealing and having this mindset and try to like leading through it with different generations.
Mhm. It's funny you asked that question because actually the heading under my books is called The Timeless Power of Positive Perspective. And that's why my grandma's story is part of it. So when I first started thinking about this book and wanting to use this PMA platform that I speak a lot about as kind of the storyline of the book, I'm like, well, there's no other way to make it feel more grounded to leverage a story that somebody had that's, a few decades earlier than mine. So that's how I pulled my grandma's story in, is to show how she dealt with it from the time, she was born, through the war, through everything, then culminating to where I'm at. So that, for me, I wrote this book and it says in there, I wrote it to my grandchildren who I haven't even met yet. I don't have grandchildren. I may someday, hope to someday, as my children continue to move through their lives. But I I did so because I want them to read it also in the spirit, like, no matter when that is or what generation, or if they pass it on to their grandkids, that this is a timeless story. This is a timeless piece of advice that I think will persevere indefinitely. So if we just think about kind of that positivity, it's not a new phenomenon. There's others that'll be like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I've done this before too." And so I don't mean to try to be claiming fame to something that hasn't been talked about in many different eras over the years, but I think it is timeless, and that's why I intentionally put that in the subheading.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and it's funny because we often like to joke, especially the creative space. There are no new ideas. It's how you frame them, and where you come from and the stories you bring. I mean, a perfect example of this is let them, the Mel Robbins thing. Like people are like, this is this sort of like mind molding thing. It's like, no, it's stoicism. It's basically been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
She just
Yep.
repackaged it with obviously her following in a book, and the same with you. Like, positivity, not new, but it's framing it through your lens, and that's the differentiator. And we keep talking about PMA, but how did that acronym even come about? Was it something that you were, something that popped into your brain one day, or was it just
Yeah, I heard it, actually, I heard it through a team event, something about positive mental, like, then I was like, I just started to say it. So I can't claim that it was my idea either. Like, I just heard it somewhere and it stuck with me. And this is like 20 years ago. And I just kind of always been saying that in my own head as I was going through those struggles, that now I started to put into a book and like, hey, Kim, you can do this, get through this. Come on, come on. You're better than this. Keep that competitive spirit. You want to help the company, you want to win, you want to be the best person you can be. You want to leave a legacy of positivity. Like, that's kind of how it started. So I started to coach people on the side, and now that I've written books, wrote this book, I've had people that I've worked with, you know, years and years ago say to me like, "Hey, like, I remember you taught me that, Kim. You taught me PMA." So I don't have a good answer to that. What I just It's been there a long time, and I started to use it in individual one-on-one coaching sessions, or when I was working with, people who were reporting to me, or I just always was trying to emulate that. So then I started to speak a lot, and was out kind of in public speaking about it. And that's when I said, "Well, I gotta write a book about this because I'm talking and telling all these stories. Why wouldn't I just capture it?" So it's kind of been this journey of that. So yeah, PMA's just been there, and that my mom gave me that pillow that's behind me, if you can see it, years ago. But it's been sitting in this office just as a daily reminder. So wherever I can put those little sticky notes, or I have a positivity calendar right in front of me, I just have those little points of like, hey, daily reflection. That also goes a long way.
Oh, that's cool. And I know technically this is a business book, but obviously it's sort of like a lifestyle as well that you're preaching. And for many people, sometimes that lifestyle is complicated with life. I I like to say, because life gets in the way. We all have master plans, and we strive to do things, or don't, but then life gets in the way. And also life gets in the way of how positive you may be at work, or what kind of self you bring to work. And I remember reading something that early on, you had trouble trying to tell people that you were a mom while also being a leader. It was one of those things. It's almost like you were it was like your superhero origin story. You had like by day you're this corporate leader, but by night you're a mother, and you almost separate that publicly. And I know that was sort of like, not to put words in your mouth, but like almost a regret in your life early on, that you didn't embrace the fact that you couldn't go into a business meeting and be like, "Yeah, I'm a mom too. I got kids. I got things going on with it." Looking back at it, how do you think that could help people now? Like the fact that, we are all not just the one thing. There's a lot of things. There's more nuance to everyone's life. How did that, what you went through early on, can help people today?
Yeah, I always look at that era of time and wish I could get a go again pass. And I learned that you don't get go again passes. Like, you have to learn from them and pivot. And that's part of why I want to tell the story, because I shouldn't have done what I did. I shouldn't have masked who I was, because I was a working mom. And I did that because my boss didn't have children. My boss's boss didn't have children. I could count on one hand the number of people that had dual career, working, dual career families that had young kids that didn't, that there just weren't many of them around me. And so I was like, I was alone and I was on this island. So I then, succumbed to my surroundings. And then I became not who I wanted to be. And so until I got feedback from somebody on my team who was brave enough to tell me, like, hey Kim, like, not sure we know you so well because you're just so robotic and you're here before everybody, leave later than anybody, you don't forget anything. Like, we don't really know the real Kim. And that was a turning point for me because I had let my mom hat stay in the closet all day long every day. And I was at that point I had two kids. I eventually had third. Um, but at that point I was like, I'm not doing that again. If I have to not be who I was and true to me, like I can't get a go again pass and redo those years of my life. But what I could do from that moment when I learned that on over 18 years ago, I'm like, I'm going to be very transparent. I'm going to say when I'm going to miss work because I'm going to one of my kids' events because I don't want to miss them anymore because I was missing them. I'm going to have a third child that I was debating whether I should have or not because I don't want to be 70 and regret that I thought work got in the way of that. And so as I tell those stories, and that's where I have a lot of followers and people that'll pull me up. But I just spoke at McDonald's 2 weeks ago and I had a woman pull me aside after I spoke and just said, you changed my perspective on something. I'm going to go do something about it and tonight, like when she was going home. And that made the trip I flew to Chicago for a quick in and out. Like that made my trip worth it because I impacted at least one person that I knew was going to do something that I wish I would have known back at that time when I wasn't balanced as trying to be, hiding the fact I was a mom, but trying to keep the corporate life. And that if you can get out of, I always said, I don't care what my title is anymore. I don't care about any about that if I can't be who I am. And so I always say I have a lot of hats I wear today. Every day I'm picking them different ones out, but I'm going to be really transparent about what the hats are in my closet. And so that people know what hats, what I'm wearing right now, because that if you can't be that, like, it's really hard to stay positive. It's really hard to be your true self.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the generational thing, I mean, Kim, your story is old as time. It's like the idea of a professional woman in the 90s, in early 2000s was like, yeah, I'm work first, family second. I mean, it was perfectly normal. Now it's kind of funny where you see people's like Instagram handle. It's like it says, it says their name and then it says mom and mom
Yeah.
or wife and stuff like that. So now I think there is, I guess, as part of the way we evolve and we become better human beings, I think we all realize that, that you can be a mom and also be a CEO and stuff like that. Whereas, 20 something years ago, that was one of those things like, oh, could this woman be the CEO if she's also a mother? I'm sure that was probably part of it too, right? Kim, like your
Yeah.
drive was like, man, I want to keep moving up the corporate ladder. But if they find out that I've got a mom and two kids, I have two kids and I have to go to soccer practice, every Wednesday, I'm like, oh God, will I be able to fill it? So a lot of that probably came from fear, right? Too, Kim?
Yeah. I think fear of wanting to be open about it and okay about it. And not seeing a lot of people that were doing it, right? And that was part of it too. If there's not a lot of people doing it, you feel like, ooh, it's uncharted territory. I better not be the first. And so
Right.
I was always like, no, like that's not okay. It wasn't okay at 20 when I was working on a manufacturing line when the management behind me never even looked at you in the eye, never said thank you to you, just was checking the list of walking through the manufacturing line. That wasn't okay. And that doesn't sit well with me, right? And so is that kind of light that was lit under me that really wanted to make these very intentional changes about showing it's okay, which is why I get a lot of joy when I can speak and I can try to help somebody be like, you can balance everything. And people even today, this will say, how did you write a book, keep your corporate job? My yoga teacher on the side, I play ice hockey. I was a head women's legion baseball coach last summer I was the only women coach in the state of Minnesota. Like, how do you do all that, Kim? It's like, because I'm intentional with my time and my choices. And I gotta fit everything in, and I'm gonna make it work, and I'm gonna stay positive around. So you don't sweat the small stuff in between there, but you find out what brings you joy. Because I'm gonna do better in my professional life if I'm happy in my personal life, and if I'm a better mom, I'm gonna be, all these things they all intertwine and play off each other.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love the fact that you're able to squeeze so much in. And I think you mentioned time management. I think that's one thing that, we all have our flaws, but I think generally as a society, we're really terrible at it. And unfortunately, our society sort of like props up the word busy. Like if you are busy, like it means you're important. And like if someone says, how are you doing today? They'll be like busy. And then all of a sudden be like, it's like dropping a grenade in the middle of a room, like, I can't possibly ask this person anything else because they're busy. And we all kind of go around, we kind of go with it. And then you're the perfect example of someone who can squeeze in a lot during the, those 12 or 13 waking hours of the day because you're intentional. You use the word intentional, but just that focus on time management. I think more and more people sort of use that cloak of busyness to prevent themselves from either growing or trying new things. And again, this is probably more American than it is in any other country, but this idea of, like, if you're busy, you're successful, or busy means that time you spent was good time. And I think trying to reframe, like, your calendar it could probably help in this whole, positive mindset thing, right? Too, that you can accomplish more than you're already doing.
Yeah, you sure can. It's all about state of mind and putting your mind to doing something, right? And doing what brings you joy, right? And so I think I teach yoga on the side not because it brings me joy. I like the connection I can make with people, and I like helping them, like get connected through breath, through movement. Like it brings me joy. And so people like, why you're still doing that, Kim? Like, why do you do that? Because I get a lot of joy out of that. And so I think it's all about intentionality. My dad read the book, and I saw him the other day, and he said, he calls me Kimmy. He's like, "Hey, Kimmy, like I learned a lot about you. Actually, I didn't really know all these things about you from a professional perspective." He goes, "But I remember when you were like 8 years old and you were playing in a softball game and you were catching and you like ran through the dugout, like the brick wall of the dugout to catch the ball because that's just what you did. You were so determined to catch the ball and you did. And like you then ran into the wall and fell down and, you know, could have been severely hurt. But like that was just you from an 8-year old." And he goes, "I just kind of watched you over time continue to just always, you know, do all these things." And it was kind of gets back to your time management point. He goes, like, you went to yoga training. You went to the yoga studio to like practice yoga. Then you like went to get trained and became trained and certified. Then you decided to go teach it. Because most people would just like go find yoga and just go do it. Like you take it to the next and the next. So, but that's because it brought me joy. So I say to everybody, like, it's never too old. You're never too old. It's never too late to try something new. I just got another master's degree a couple years ago because, and I wrote this book because, and it's like, because it's all these ideas that might be in there. But if you don't stop and pause and take time to do these things that you are like, that might be on, I don't really have a bucket list, but I have the list of things I always want to kind of go after. And I'm really intentional about going after them because I don't want to regret that I didn't, or look back and be like, oh, I wish I would have. And so my advice to anybody out there, if there's something that you're itching to do or try or go see or travel, like now's the time to do it. Figure it out because I trust me, you don't want to live with regret of something you didn't do. And time management works out with all that'll come together because you can always say you're too busy, but done right, the too busy, it works itself out. It really does if you're very, very intentional with your time.
I mean, I know you got this new book, but maybe there's a time management book in your future there, Kim. When do you have time to get to the next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I get asked that a lot. I do some coaching on the side and a lot of different mentoring over the years. And I talk to a lot of people about that. Um, because on the surface, you'd think I have too much on my plate. I'm like, no, I don't. It's just right for me. And it's right for me because I'm very balanced with how I approach it.
That's great. That's great. And we talked about this career journey you've had in this climb, and you write about climbing without ceilings. Unpack that phrase for me. What does that phrase mean to you in practical terms? Climbing without ceilings.
Yeah, I think it's about again reaching for whatever that next thing is for you, potential goal, this or that, but don't limit yourself with that constraint of why you can't, why not, right? And like back to others, like if you're aspiring, if your goal, and my goal never was a certain job title. Like I just kind of moved up and moved kind of through the ranks, different things, but it was all kind of the path that was, and I followed my nose and I stayed curious and it led to this next thing. But if your goal is a certain level, your goal is whatever, you're going to go back and get a degree or you're going to switch careers, like go after that goal and don't put a ceiling on yourself. Don't put a limitation that you can't, or it's not the right time, or I won't be able to do it, or, oh, I'm not sure. Cause that self-doubt, that little voice of negativity in your head is what's bringing you down. If you change that tone and that little voice is like, hey, PMA, say positive, you can do it. You can do it. There's the ceilings go away, right? So there is no ceiling. So those self-inflicted ceilings are what get in our way. And oftentimes, not to be gender specific, but I see a lot of my women mentees that I coach and spend a lot of time with, sometimes self-doubting, like, hey, my resume, like the next job has these 10 requirements. I only have 5 of them or 6 of them. I'm not going to apply. And I'm like, ooh, don't put your own ceiling on something too, like until you get in there and try. So that's a little bit of what that meaning or that saying means to me.
Well, that's funny. It's funny you mentioned about the women not feeling qualified. Wasn't there like a study a few years ago? They say that more men who are unqualified are more likely to apply for a job than a woman, just because of whatever's in that DNA of caveman DNA of like, yeah, I could do any job, whereas women will second guess themselves, the kingdom come, and not apply for that job. When it comes to those conversations with your women mentees, is it simple as you saying just get over yourself and do it kind of thing, or
A little bit. I mean,
nuance.
to cut to the chase, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
But I kind of help them why that's important and try to give them examples and build the confidence that they can do that. And it's so fun when I've had, I've watched some that I've developed or spent a lot of time with, and they've made that step, and then they come back and they're like, oh, like thank you because that was the right thing to do. I'm so happy, and I'm so proud of myself, and so that makes it all worth it to me. But yeah, we got to get out of our own. We're in our own heads. Like we are our own worst enemy in that at times, and I think that's where again, don't like limit yourself through that ceiling that you're assuming's there because that's like like it's really not. And you can break, and even if it is, like, break through it, right? Like, bring a hammer with you and like chop away at it because it's not needed.
That's great. That's good. And so, in times of like social and global uncertainty, and you live in Minnesota, which, without having to go into, has been through a lot over the last 5 years. How does having the PMA mindset? How can individuals apply that when things are not going well? And I'm not even talking about like individually. I'm talking about as like a society, and we can even go down a further rabbit hole, whether it comes to negativity on social media or imposter syndrome, all the stuff that can already happen. But tell me about like living through with this mindset in times where you just don't know what tomorrow will bring.
Definitely, I think that honestly, that's when I started to write this book during this time frame. It's like I felt like that was even more important. It was kind of more of the catalyst, like, hey, now's the time. Can we really got to do this? Because society around me could use it. And whether one person or 10 people read it or it impacts them in a positive way, like right now, I think we need that within each other. And I've so much so, like my son, I have 3 children, and they, to hear them talk about like, hey, my mom's like mantra of this, or my like, it's helped them and kind of their even generational, um, you know, their friends and kind of how they're perceiving to be around this community and the societal times too. I think it's helped. Like hearing them kind of like display my message to their friends, or even how they approach things themselves. Again, I think it goes a long way. But yeah, it's heavy. We live in trying times, and every period of history has them. Like that's again back to my grandmother and how I start her story, and like you know growing up in Dresden and war torn East Germany in times like unprecedented. And to even now, like you correlated to my kids and what eventually my grandkids might be going through if what you say is in recent years has kind of been going on. Like, Call it's so important that we take the time to pause, reflect, and kind of keep that little voice I said that's chipping in your ear, because it's there are good people out there. There's a lot of I live in a great place, and then surrounded by wonderful friends and families and opportunities, and we can't let the negativity get in the way of staying true to where we are and showing up as one society.
I always wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book. You kind of spoiled it earlier that you dedicate the book to your
Oh,
future grand.
yeah.
No, but what I want to ask is, what do your kids say about you writing about your future grandchildren? Are they're like, hey mom, can you slow down a second? Can I live my
Mhm.
life before I have children? What do your kids
Yeah.
say about this dedication?
Yeah, we haven't had that conversation yet, so I'll have to report back. Specifically, my one son just went back to college. He's just going back to a senior in college, and he asked to take a book with him. So I just got copies of them recently. So he took a book back, and he said he'd report back after he read it. So I'll be curious what he says. I think they know a little bit that I'm bringing in their great grandmother's story to it. And I think they can assume a little bit I don't know if they'll assume the dedication. I hope I hope they pause in the moment, and I was very sincere about that. When I was asked what I wanted it to be, it was there's no doubt in my mind that that's who I was dedicating it to, given what my grandmother gave me. And like if my grandchildren, if I never meet them, if they could read the book someday and think, oh, their grandma Kim Skanson was pretty cool. She did some pretty unique things in her life, and I'm going to try to emulate her in some way, shape, or form. Like, to me, then they're going to live a positive life, and they're going to impact people in a really positive way.
Awesome. Her name is Kim Skanson. The book, Attitude Advantage, The Timeless Power of Positive Perspective. Kim, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was a joy.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Kim and her other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.